Welcome to the Karen Kenney Show.
Hey, you guys, welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. I am so super duper excited. I'm kind of I'm geeking out on this episode because it was so much fun. And I think you as the listener are going to be intrigued and fascinated by it as well. So today I'm talking with Lisa Dadd. Her last name is Dadd, Lisa Dadd. And I met Lisa through a friend of mine, Emily Aborn, who I also have had on the show. And Lisa was doing a workshop for Emily, and she built this, and that's Emily's community and group and stuff. And um, it caught my ear. It caught my ear, and here's why. Because Lisa is, well, let me tell you a little bit about her bio, and then I'll dive into what really caught my ear and why I'm having her on the show. So Lisa is a corporate sales and marketing manager turned transformational business owner. And what she does is she works to like build a bridge between success and fulfillment. And she has a radical approach to selling from inside our comfort zones. So I know so many people when they hear the word like sales, they kind of cringe and they go, ew, and they feel like icky and no. So the thing about quote unquote sales, though, too, even if you're not in business, I want you to listen to this episode because we are in sales all the time, even in our personal life. If you have children, if you're in a relationship, in whatever, when you're trying to get people to buy in to any kind of idea of any kind, not just products, etc. So it's a really fascinating thing. So she has a radical approach to selling from inside our comfort zone, which is the exact opposite of like so often you hear everybody saying, you got to get out of your comfort zone. You got to get out of your comfort zone. The magic happens on the other side or outside the walls of your comfort zone. And she takes a really different approach that shifts the paradigm that we've been taught to believe. And she thinks that not only can we feel good in the process, but it's also our most effective approach to finding success in business and I would add in our personal life. So she spent 15 years in the competitive industry of corporate healthcare. She mastered like strategic sales and marketing and management skills from the world's largest pharmaceutical company. And in addition to the success that she experienced, she climbed the corporate ladder that was offered to her. And she had a deep sense that her greatest potential was yet to be realized. So even though she was having all this success, something deeper within her was calling to her. And so, with nearly a decade of independent consulting and intense training in leadership development and facilitation of social emotional learning programs, she's uncovered an innate way to access potential in people. So, she uses a diagnostic tool called soul language. And this is what fascinated me about Lisa. So, when I joined the little workshop that she was doing for my friend Emmeline, I was sitting there and the whole time I kept thinking, this is like a wicked spiritual approach to sales. And I was fascinated by it. And I wanted to dive deeper into this concept of soul language and talk more about it and have my listeners have a chance because it's just like how everybody loves to find out through different diagnostic tools, right? Like the Enneagram or human design or your astrological sign and stuff like that. We always want to know more deep ways to understand ourselves. And I think that soul language is a powerful tool. And so now Lisa works with innovative leaders to integrate an awareness of who they are at their core into the way that they do business. And it's just fascinating. And so the success of her process is particularly related to her unique approach to sales training. She believes that selling is a critical communication skill for all of us to have. Because whether we're selling a product, a service, or an idea, we all need to create buy-in with the people in our life. And whether that's people we live with or people who are potential clients, etc. So what soul sales does is it teaches the art of creating buy-in through the enrolling language of a person's own innate energy. And if you're like, what does that mean exactly? Well, tune in to find out, because we dive in deep in this conversation about the 7 different archetypes of the soul sales archetypes, which is fascinating. And I know you're going to be listening, trying to decipher, like, which one am I? Which one am I? But we had a really fantastic conversation. I think you're really going to dig it. And just thank you so much for listening. And I hope you enjoy this episode. Hey, you guys, welcome to the Karen Kenney Show. I am wicked excited for my guest today. And I haven't even known Lisa that long, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got to know her, why this episode is even happening, and then I'll give her a chance to talk. So Lisa, just give me a sec to do my business, and then we'll bring you right
go.
in. So you guys heard me in the intro. I talked all about her bio, but now I'm going to tell you personally, like, why I was fascinated by her. And you guys also know that I do like 90% solo shows. I'm really happy just hanging out like a weirdo up in my room, talking to myself, like talking to you guys. So if I have somebody on the show taking up real estate, there's a reason why. And it's either because I already know them and love them, or I'm wicked curious about them, or they're doing work in the world that I think is important and powerful, and I want more people to know about them. So I found out about Lisa through my friend Emily, who is on my podcast a little while ago. I call her Emmeline. So Emmeline, she built this. She had a workshop or a class or whatever. And it was all about these, like, the way that I don't remember the exact title, but what I remember my curious brain picking up on was things like soul language and soul sales, and maybe something about archetypes and whatever. And I was like, okay, this sounds right up my alley, whatever's happening. And I want to know more. And so I went, and there was one workshop, and I learned a little bit about it. And right there, I like sent Lisa an email, and I'm like, hey, will you come on the show? Because I want people to know more about what you do and all this stuff. And then I went to a second workshop that you did, because your workshops are always changing, right? Even though it's like, I would say like big umbrella, but the topics and stuff change. So you can go to a bunch of different ones. And I came to the second one more to learn more personally from me, but also to just get a deeper sense of you and your work for when I had you on the show. So Lisa Dad, welcome to the Karen Kenney Show.
Thank you for having me, Karen. And I have to say, immediately when you said, Lisa and I haven't known each other that long, the knee jerk was like, we haven't?
I know. I know.
It's totally true. We haven't, but I feel like I've known you for a really long time, and you're super fun. So anyway.
Thank you. Yeah. So when we had a conversation before this, when I reached out to you, because I think it's wicked smart too. And I think it's one of the aspects, and you guys who are listening, we're going to get all into like soul language and all that shit. But one of the things is there has to be, for me, there has to be alignment, right? I always say the assignment is alignment. So we had a conversation prior to this, and we literally had to stop ourselves. We're like, hey, we got to go. Like, we were supposed to talk for half an hour, and we're like 90 minutes later. We're like, let's get out of here. So I think part of that is sometimes when you just kind of find people you're resonant with, it's just really easy. So I have the same sense. It's kind of weird that I'm like, I've only known you like how long, and over Zoom, like what's happening? So yeah. So the thing is like, so when I read your bio, right? And people find out, like, you've been in corporate sales, you are a marketing manager, you're now a transformational business owner, you help people do all these things, you go into big companies and do big things, right? So one of the things that I talk about in my work, right? And I think I've told you this before, one of the habits of my work is like that your story to your glory. And what happens a lot of times when you're a guest on a podcast or a guest speaker, or like you go into companies and you do big trainings or whatever, when you get introduced, people are meeting you in this now, like this adult version of you and all your accolades and your glory. They're kind of meeting you in that glory space.
Yeah.
And what I always like to start the show with when I have a guest, because it's what I'm wicked curious about, is what's the story though? Like, what's your story? Like, what were you like as a kid? And is how you were as a kid now informing, inspiring, influencing, and showing up in your work that you do now?
That's so meaty. I mean, we could unpack that for a long time.
Well,
Let me give you the short version of what popped to my head immediately when you said that, because I think that's where we need to start. When I was little. This is what's informing my work now, is what I believe the bigger core umbrella of what I do. When I was a little girl, I always felt like I was ostracized for being smart. Sounds a little strange, but I was the smart kid in class. I one of the skills that I had was doing well in school. I always say to my sister now, who's a teacher, and she's got someone that doesn't do well in school, I said, they're brilliant, just not at what you're grading them on. Because I want to be real clear that I was brilliant at what they graded me on. I just happened to be good in school. However, I felt really ostracized by it. I was made fun of a lot, right? I was a teacher's pet and the brown noser, and I was all of these things because I did well in school.
Yeah.
And what that teaches you, because there's a lot of support at that time, there was a lot of support for kids that were struggling in school. People notice that, right? They notice kids struggling in school and they get help academically. What's not noticed is how much kids who are doing really well in school are struggling internally. And you wouldn't have known that from looking at me on the outside. I was a pretty outgoing kid, but I really struggled with this need to be perfect and this fear of being too good. And so I was like literally stuck between this idea of like, I can't show people that I'm really good, but I feel like the only way to actually get validation or love is to be really good.
That
So
is, yeah. So that's a tough. So you find yourself in like a pickle, right? Because it's like, and also it's like basically to quote unquote fit in with your
yes,
peer group,
I did.
you have to shrink and make yourself
Yeah.
smaller. And then, but the way that you got validation and reward and love and notice by the adult population is by being good. So like
Yeah.
you were in some ways, I mean, like kind of
Yeah.
screwed because
I
it's
was
like,
screwed. Yeah.
how do I navigate this?
Well, let me tell you when this became the aha and how it's informed where I am now. And you're going to love this because I know you're very close with Marianne Williamson. And a friend of mine, when early days of my leaving corporate and trying to figure out what is it I'm supposed to be doing and what is my business anyway, I was talking things through with a really good friend of mine who was also a fellow business owner. And the Marianne Williamson quote came up, and I thought, that's it right there. The whole, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, is that we are powerful beyond measure. And so when we get to that line of like shrinking so others will not feel small around you, there's nothing enlightened about shrinking so others will not feel small around you. I was like, oh my goodness, like I can feel it now. Yeah, like whoa. And in that moment is when I had that conversation with my girlfriend, and I said, you know what? When I was a little girl, I was made fun of for being smart. And I learned eventually to dumb myself down or to hide it. So it got to the point where it kind of carried me into a bit of high school. But then at the end of high school and the beginning of university, I really was doing my best to just fit in with the fun kids and not be known as the smarty pants, right? And so that, you're asking me what was the story that informs my life? It's that, because why am I so passionate about everyone, but women specifically, understanding, owning, appreciating their brilliance generously and unapologetically, right? How do you share that with the world generously and unapologetically? And that's really what I am all about. We talk about sales and we talk business and all those things, but at the core of it, can we be who we are generously, which means we do it for the greater service of the whole, but unapologetically.
Yes. Okay. So what I love about that so much, and I'm going to use a little saying from our childhood. So I love so much about what you just shared. And double amen hands listeners, if you can relate to some of this. I know there's a bunch of you smarty pants out there that suffered the same affliction. And it cost you to be in the gifted and talented group of kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but wait, so last night on one of the calls, for the Nest, my membership in spiritual membership and community, I was talking about how when we were little kids, like I love to flip things. Like that's my thing, right? Story to glory. I love to flip things around, kaleidoscope it, look at things a little bit differently. So remember when we were kids and somebody would say something to you like, you're a big stupid. And then the comeback would be, takes one to know one, right?
I do remember that.
I love to take that now. And when somebody is an empowered woman, right? A brilliant woman and whatever, they're just a genius and they're in their power and whatever, and they compliment me, I always say back to them, Takes one to
Takes
know
one to
one.
know one. Yeah.
And that's the
Love it.
feeling that I have. Like, you want to give people permission. And it's so in alignment with the work that you do in soul language and soul sale archetypes and all this stuff. It's because it's for me, and I've heard you say this, but this is what my work is about too. I always say samesies different. It's about
Yes.
this radical self-awareness, who we
Yes.
really are, and fucking showing up as exactly who we are, and we are meant to be and created to be and purpose to be. So
Yeah.
showing up on purpose with purpose, and not feeling like, well, me being me is going to take anything away from you.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we also can bring that energy, I will say, when we don't do the work on that and when we don't really fully appreciate that and sink into that, some of us don't know how to do that. Because I can think about times in early in my corporate days and maybe even back in those grade school days when I was feeling ostracized, there were times when what I would say would take someone else out because this is why I love teaching people about radical self-awareness, doing the work, understanding your soul language. Because in soul language, there's extremes of when you're in fear and when you're in love.
Yes.
And when we're in fear, we can take people out. And so that's why I love to go beyond authenticity, because I say, the true core of who we are when we come from love,
Mm-hmm.
we can't take people out. However, there is a natural, authentic version of us that can take people out when we're coming from that fear place.
Yeah. So, and we'll talk about this when we discuss the archetypes,
Yeah.
how, I think of it like there's a range, right? And
Hmm.
so, and it's kind of like I remember so I've been vegan for like 20 years, and there was a period of time for several years where I also became macrobiotic. And to eat macrobiotically means to kind of think of it like a rainbow. And on one side is the very yang, the very like salty food, processed foods,
Hmm.
tobacco, coffee, meat, things like that. And then there's the very yin foods, right? Which are like sweets and like, think really expansive foods. And then the whole purpose of macrobiotics was to eat right in the middle, to eat in that balanced place of like grains and root vegetables and
Okay.
leafy green things, right? Because you could literally see your body chemistry and how your personality shift and change. So when we comes to these archetypes, I see, as soon as you mention them, I always see them like that
Yeah.
rainbow, and
Yeah.
saying, yeah, on one side there's this extreme when
Hmm.
you dip into, maybe let's call it the quote unquote negative aspect of that
Yeah.
trait or whatever, and then there's the more like when you're really in the power of it, or
Positive.
you're
Yeah.
balanced, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've now mentioned that word, like, soul language, and there's like soul sales, because I'm so fascinated, because I know so many people. First of all, I want you to tell us a little bit about what soul language is and stuff like that. And
Sure.
then a little bit about, before we get into all the archetypes, a little bit about
Mhm.
soul um, sales.
Yeah.
And we're going to make the connection also. So if you're listening right now and you're like, well, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm not a business owner. Trust me, we're all fucking selling something all the time. And
All the time.
we're going to make that personal connection for you. So like, stay with us, hang in this conversation, because we're going to go somewhere.
Yeah.
So talk about how, like, you leave your corporate career, why, and then how do you find yourself now doing what you do? Can you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about, first of all, maybe a taste of what you do, and then like what made you say, like, I'm out of corporate, like I am trusting this instinct that I have to
Yeah.
make a leap of faith.
Let's start here to say that. So I was in corporate for 15 years. I never really meant to get into corporate. I wanted to be a doctor and I didn't get into medical school. And I found myself in corporate job. My aunt used to say, yeah, Lisa, I didn't see you as a doctor. I saw you as a CEO. So she always saw that. And all of a sudden I'm climbing this corporate ladder and I didn't even feel like I was climbing it. I felt like I was accidentally getting promoted. It was accidental promotions because I just kept kind of I follow my curiosity and I show up fully in who I am. However, with each progressive step, I was getting less and less happy, less and less fulfilled, felt like I made less and less impact. And it felt like with each increasing rung of that ladder, which I didn't even know I was climbing, I was feeling less and less myself. All these things
Mm.
are happening. And so for many, many years, I used to say, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. I used to say it that way. I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, but when I know, I'll go do it. And then I realized there was a particularly really hard year in corporate. I had a boss at the time, and we just did not speak the same soul language. And it was really, really hard year. And I realized I wasn't figuring it out. And so I all of a sudden actually came to a moment. I actually got a new boss who I absolutely loved. And there was this major shift. We got along brilliantly. He was a fabulous leader. And when the time came, we were major changes coming in the corporation. I still wanted to go. I still wanted to go. And it was like this, I always say it was a split second decision, years in the making, because I was literally standing in my kitchen and I was debating this whole thing, because it was like downsizings, right sizings of companies were always opportunities for me. And I knew there could be if I wanted them, but I was more afraid of keeping my job than losing it.
That's a significant thing right there. Like that's
Everyone,
clarity. That's clarity.
everyone around me was afraid to lose their job. And I realized I was afraid to keep mine. Like, boom, right? Mic drop, boom. And I'm standing in my kitchen, and I know my boss is trying to encourage me to go overseas and do all these things. And I'm like, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? What do I want to do? And all of a sudden this like voice, this knowing, this something comes out of nowhere. You could just go. I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, yeah, you just leave, quit. And it's like, wait a second, that wasn't on the list of choices. But in that moment, I simultaneously knew that it was exactly the right thing to do, and no idea what I would do once I left.
Yeah. So let's pause. Let's hit pause for a second there, because it's a fascinating thing, because this is where I might call it faith. I
Mhm.
might call it spiritual team on the job, STOTJ. You are
Yep.
being informed from your inner teacher, your inner knowing spirit, Holy Spirit, people, intuition, gut instinct. Some voice, something is speaking up loud and clear. Some divine intelligence is saying, "Hey, psst, there's an option D," right? Like I didn't even know. Like
None of the above. Yeah.
didn't even know, you know. But you didn't have the next steps available to you.
Yeah, no idea.
So it's like you knew, it's like I knew, but I didn't know. Like I
Yeah.
knew this thing, I knew something had to change. I knew that this was no longer a good fit. It was not in alignment anymore, didn't feel great, but I have no idea what's next. So how do you like do the long math on that? Like how do you reconcile it? What I would maybe call a leap of faith, but what would you call it?
Yeah.
Like what happened?
You know, some people would call it a leap of faith, and some people say that, wow, that's really out of a comfort zone. I was like, I thought it would become too comfortable, but actually that's not true. I was so unhappy and so miserable that it at the end of the day, I wanted more joy and more purpose and more fun. And but I got to say, in that actual moment, there was no logic. It wasn't intellect behind it at all. And it was long before I really started my deep dive into my own spiritual journey and my own radical self-awareness. It really was prior to that. So it was so strong and so loud and so specific that it was undeniable. Once that came, there was absolutely, it was like there wasn't another choice. I
Yes.
don't know how else to describe it. Now
No,
that's how
yeah.
I describe it.
Yeah, I mean, to stay would have been to betray some part of yourself that was speaking, like speaking loudly and clearly to you.
Yeah.
And you know, when I think back to one of the reasons why I immediately was like, oh, I want to have Lisa on the show, is because I think that it's so fascinating, because even the work that you do now, and you help a lot of entrepreneurs, you help a lot of, you know, strong, powerful women, businesses, corporations, all these things. But it's a very, to me, through my lens, it's a very spiritual approach
Yeah.
to doing things. And I think, you know, I think the world could use more of business, as Marianne Williamson often says, where the bottom line is love
Oh
and
yeah.
not just capital and money or whatever, right? And so
Mhm.
I think the work that you're doing
Mhm.
is really indicative of that. It's like finding people. And you mentioned a couple of things that I think are important, which we're going to segue into, because you mentioned comfort zone.
Mhm.
And I think that, you know, you talk about this in your work. But before we go into this whole, you know, growth in our comfort zone and selling
Yeah.
in our comfort zone and stuff
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
if we're going to jump into this idea of sales, let's touch upon that thing about how I think I heard you say in one of your workshops something like, we're creating buy-in all the time. So can we
Absolutely.
talk about how quote
Yeah.
unquote sales show up both
Sure.
personally and professionally?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I have such a broad perspective of what sales is. And often I'll be like, that's sales and that's sales and that's sales over there. We just don't realize it. We wouldn't call it that, especially because most people like get weirded out with the word sales. But we're always enrolling others or creating interest or creating buy-in or discussing value of our viewpoint over someone else's, like we might not use those words, but I always say, I don't have children, but I always say to the parents out there, I said, you're selling your teenager on why they need to clean their room, or maybe, we're enrolling our family in why, going on a ski vacation is better than a beach vacation, or maybe we're trying to engage our spouse into like taking on certain responsibilities in the house so that we can build our business, or so we can just go to the gym. I don't know, but we're constantly in this idea of like, what's valuable to me, what's valuable to you, how can we all, so to me, that's it. All of it's sales to me.
Yeah. And one of the things I thought of as you're naming all these things, one of the first things that came to my mind is when you're trying to get your kid to eat that damn broccoli,
Oh,
when
absolutely.
you're like, when you're
That's a
trying
sell
to get
job.
buy-in on bedtimes, when you're trying to get or even just like what's on Netflix and you're like, oh, but sweetie, I really want to watch this movie. Or can we get takeout tonight or whatever? I mean, we are constantly, like you're saying, and we see it in politics, we see in whatever. And we definitely obviously see it in business, but in our personal lives, you're 100% right. We are always well, I shouldn't say always. We are often trying to get people to kind of buy into what you're saying.
We do. And enrollment's another word too. And you can look at it this way, is often we're either enrolling someone or being enrolled. So even when we go on to say a social media, so whether you're a business owner or not, you get into social media and all of a sudden you are really angry about some issue that you didn't care about. You've been sold. You've been enrolled into the drama, or you've been enrolled into the whatever is happening, right? We get enrolled all the time by other people's energy and other people's conversations. And sometimes it's positive and sometimes it's not. So we don't want to go there, but we will say that relationships in general, communication in general has a lot of this idea of creating buy-in and enrollment. And my piece is just, can we do it in a way you can become a really effective salesperson? Usually a really effective communicator. It means that you know how to listen. It means you know how to communicate your own experience and your own value in a way that other people would get, that you can meet people where they are. This isn't about manipulating or persuading or pushing other people.
Yes.
At least not the way that I do sales, that way I look at sales. And so we can recognize that we're always doing it and we don't always do it well.
Well, here's the thing, like, so what I'm hearing also is creating connection or creating resonance or creating energy that feels vibrant or aligned, right? And so when you're saying, people, first of all, people buy in lots of different ways, like other than just money. I remember you saying, I think on one of you, and you can always correct me if my brain doesn't get it right.
Time,
attention, energy, money.
Focus, priorities. Yeah. Time, energy, focus, priorities, energy, all of those things we buy into. We are bought into that, right? So the question is, are we bought more into the value of watching Netflix over the buy-in of getting off the couch and doing some exercise? We're bought into one or the other.
Yes. And something that you said too is what resonates for me, because I always say, in fact, I just wrote it in my email yesterday when I said, I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. Yeah. I want to show up in me being me. And if you feel called to work with me, that's way more interesting to me than I just did such a great job manipulating some stuff. And I'm not saying all marketing is that, but I was an advertising major in college. I mean, communications major. So I understand kind of like some of the psychology and what's happening. But for me, it's more like, I always just say, like, I just want to make money being me. Can I just be me? And then if people feel attracted to that, then it works. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's very sagey, but we'll get to that in a minute. I'll get to that in a minute. So absolutely. And what that means though, for different archetypes is going to mean something differently. So, that whole idea, I don't want to have to convince anyone. First of all, I don't think anything that feels like a pushing at someone is the way to do sales, regardless of your archetypical energy and what would work better for you. Anytime we feel like there's an aggressive pushing to it, that's where we've tipped to the fear side.
Okay. Yeah. So we can think of that arc again. Let's go back to the rainbow I keep saying. So it's again,
Yeah.
when we were on in one of your workshops. And you guys, I'm telling you, if you just get on Lisa's email list, just attend one of these suckers, because we're going to be able to, sip, get a taste of things on the podcast today. But if you really want to dive more deeply into archetypes and all that stuff, I definitely want you to go and check one out, because one of the things that you helped me do is we were talking about, how do you take like the depth and breadth of what you do for work, and what's that one core, what's the core conversation that you're always having.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like, story to glory, the trauma to, all the grief, the trauma, the struggle, the suffering, to this glory thing. But it really is, I always say, it's that shift from fear to love.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I think we feel like we've known each other for a long time, because those things resonate with the both of us. And I think that your work, when you're teaching people through these soul language archetypes, which we're going to get into, what you're really teaching people how to do is to stand in the truth of that, who they are, which is love, and to operate, whether it's in business or in their personal life, because you can't really separate. I always say, your whole life is your spiritual life.
You
Right?
can't separate them.
You cannot separate them, right?
Yeah.
So, one of the things let's just dive into this, because we've mentioned it.
Yeah.
What is soul? We'll get into soul sales and the archetypes and all that, but what is soul language? Like, can you just give us a little sip of that?
Yeah. Soul language specifically is an assessment tool, really a diagnostic tool that my business partner and mentor, she's out of the Netherlands, that she created or founded the actual tool in order to see the soul language underneath it. So the word soul language really speaks to the actual tool that we use for it. The material itself has been downloaded, channeled, brought forth like for decades and decades and decades from spiritual leaders all over the world, right? So it's not that she created the material. She just created the way to assess it, so that we could say, okay, oh, this is why you have a lot of sagey energy. Like, how do we know it's sagey energy? It's just an assessment tool to help us get there quicker. Soul language is really all about the core of who you are, like from an energetic place. Like, what's the energy underneath all of this? The core of who you are. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Let me interrupt, because I know people are listening and they might be like, in their head, I can just imagine it bubbling up.
Okay.
So is this kind of like astrology? Is this kind of like getting my Enneagram done? Is this kind of like human design? Like, how is this maybe I don't know if you know the answer to this. How is this tool maybe in relation to any of those things? Like, what is it getting you like specific clarity on?
Yeah. There's a lot of similarities in some of the tools that you mentioned. There's a lot of archetype programs out there. Most of them, especially in corporations, business language, are usually archetypically someone's just made them up to compartmentalize people based on behaviors and personalities.
Yeah.
Okay. So the difference with soul language is that it's not based on your personality or your behaviors. It's not to say there aren't some that kind of often go with different energies, but you won't change them, right? Like if you do a DISC assessment or a Myers-Briggs or something like that in corporate, you may see that over time you would change. Soul language is your core soul being, what you came here to express and learn to grow. So you should see some overlap with some of the other ones that are based spiritually on the energy and the core of who we are, because my firm belief is they actually come from all the same place. It's not like I'm meant to be human design and you're meant to be Enneagram and soul language and all that. For me, all of the tools, even though I love this one and I use this one and I appreciate and I master this one, I also love to know my Enneagram. I know I'm a 7, right? I'm a 7. Everyone who ever knows Enneagram, that's it's probably not a surprise. I've become a 7, I'm a generator in human design. Like I know all of these things. When you lay them out, they often will like lay over. They'll intersect. They have to intersect, right? This stuff is coming from largely the same place. The one thing I would say though, is the soul language material is fairly pure still, because it's not quite out there as much. So some of the tools, Enneagram being one of them, a fabulous core source material, but it's been manipulated a lot of times. So you could go to one place and have your Enneagram done and have a totally different result than if you went somewhere else, perhaps, right? So there's a little bit of what happens when people start to, and it's one of the reasons we don't just make a free quiz online for people, because we don't want it to be manipulated in that
Well,
way.
it's much more in depth. Isn't it like 91? Isn't it like a
Yeah, there's 91 questions on the assessment. And your report, there's 7 different archetypes, but there's 7 different aspects. And then so that's like 49, a grid of 49. And each of those 49s, like you said, you call it a rainbow, I call it a spectrum or a cloud. So it's similar. There's a plus and minus pole to them, which is not good or bad. You can call them fear and love. For me, it's all about the feedback of it, right? Like your soul doesn't just come here to get to the plus side. People always say, I just want to be in the plus side all the time and love all the time. Well,
just want to be good.
Right. But fear teaches us many things. And there's a lot of feedback there to bring us back to love, right? Like, so there's a lot so there is a depth and a layering to the material, while at the same time, I just love the way they do the archetypes, because it's very easy to apply, I guess, is in my, you don't have to be thinking about gates and channels and all the different things.
Yes.
It's easier. And the best thing about soul language, in my opinion, you don't have to believe where the source material came from. You don't have to believe in anything. You don't have to be a certain religion. You don't even have to be super spiritual, really, because the way we use the tool, it's activating a truth within you. So when I work with people, what I'm looking for is really them going, oh, yes. Oh my God, that feels so good. As soon as they do that, I'm like, okay, we're on the right track. And when they're like, I don't totally get that, we start to discern it and look at it. Yeah. And it's the tool doesn't have the power. The power is always within us, in our own soul. The tool just helps us use a language that can activate it. That's all. Remember it, rediscover it, play around with it, bring it to light, deepen our understanding, right? So that's, to me, what the tool is all about. It's that. It's not the tool on its own doesn't have the power.
No, it's like in The Wizard of Oz with Doris, when Glenda the Good Witch says, the power has always been within you all along.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Isn't that so great? Yeah. And so, all right. So I love that. I think that just helped people get a little more clear, because we do, like, in this day and age, it's like, oh, let's pull tarot cards, or let's do this, or let's do that. And there's 1,000 ways. Yeah. And at the end of the day, what people are really doing is they're trying, and we say it as writers, when readers read your work as a writer, what they're saying on some level is, show me. My writing mentor, Andre Dubus III, taught me that. They're saying, show me. They want to see themselves. So all of these tools, what they're really, it's like being a detective. What we're like, can you help me understand me more?
Absolutely.
Like, I want these things to give me more clarity and more understanding, or whatever. And I love that there's a bunch of different tools. And I also love when I talk to people who are wicked, like, excited and all in on the one that they're doing, because when you follow that curiosity, I bet as a kid also you were like that. You follow that curiosity, and that's what's going to give you the depth and the breadth, because you stick with it. You're not going around digging shallow holes. It's like, I'm so fascinated by this.
So this is here, the reason for me is also shown in my soul language, because in my soul language, it shows that I'm at the phase of mastery. And it is a king energy phase. And it so speaks to me. It's about mastery. Like, so even when I was that little girl in school, I'll give you a little story because it illustrates it so well of what life was like for me back then. I remember, I think I was in grade 6. We had just got a math test back or something. And there was a girl who sat beside me, and she was also really smart. And she was really always competitive with me. And she was bugging me to find out what I got on the math test. What did you get? What did you get? What did you get? And I didn't want to share it with her, because I was at that phase. I already knew I got made fun of for sharing. So I wouldn't share it with her. And then she kept on me. Oh, you mustn't have done very well. And mustn't have. And she was just kind of bugging me. And I can't remember if I finally flipped it over, if she grabbed it and flipped it over, to be honest. Whatever it was, she ended up finding out, and I scored higher than she did. So I was hiding it, and she was assuming I was lower than her. And I was hiding it because I actually was higher than her in that moment. Right. And so, oh my gosh, I just lost what I was going to say to you. It was right there. But this,
you were telling me why you loved it.
The mastery. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. You got me back on. Whew, I was lost in that childhood memory for a minute.
That happens to me too sometimes.
But here's the thing, is that she kind of was competing with me or comparing with me. I also remember having zero interest in what she got. Like, I think my score was something like 98. And I was only interested in the fact of where did I miss the 2%? That's all I wanted to know. My goal always was competing against myself.
Yes.
I was very competitive, but I was always competitive against myself, which then as I learn as I get older, oh, well, you're in the stage of mastery. I'm like, okay, that makes total sense. I want to master it. It doesn't matter if you've mastered it or not mastered it, because that doesn't impact whether I'm mastering it, right? So the competitive, and it makes sense because competitive energy is actually more of a warrior energy than king energy. King energy is more about mastery. So it's like when I found out I'm in that phase, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So with soul language, it's like, I want to master it now. Like I don't want to just know a little bit about it. If I'm working with clients, I want to really
you want to know your shit.
I want to get it, you know, and
Yes.
not just from a knowledge thing. It's not just about reading it. It's like, I love when I'm working with a client and things just like, they just like integrated, right? King's about integration to integrated into my body. And then I'm like, oh, I got this now. Right. And then next time a scholar sits in front of me, like that's integrated, that thing I learned by using it with someone else. So that's what I'm saying. Your soul language starts to really speak to you and through you.
That makes so much sense. And it's the difference between being able to regurgitate information and embodying it, living it, having it. Like if somebody says like, oh, do you prepare to go on a podcast? And I'm like, well, no, I'm just going to talk about me and my work. So I don't need to overthink it. Right. So when you become it, so you're becoming your soul language. And now part of it is this mastery of being able to be a guide to help others. And it's so fantastic and it's so fabulous. And I can't let it go by without saying, I finally just heard your Canadian accent just snuck out for like a second there. I think you said against. And I was like, oh, we didn't even mention the fact that you're Canadian. But there it was. It gave you
It
away.
Slips out every now and then.
Yeah, super cute.
Yeah. Sometimes I spend so much time in the US. Sometimes my Canadian friends say my Americanism slips out, but then my American friends will say the same thing. A little A will slip out or something.
I just heard a little. I was like, ooh, because I love accents. I thought it was fantastic. Okay, so we've teased people a little bit, right? So now we've mentioned like sage. You say, oh, it's a little sagey, and then there's priest, whatever. So can we talk about? Okay, here's what I want to know. The soul sales archetypes. There's 7 of them, right?
Yeah.
And then you say there's a larger grid that's 7 by 7 because then there's aspects and all these things. But was that something that you created, the soul language archetypes? Is this something that you?
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't.
You're just applying it to what you're brilliant at. Okay.
I'm applying it. And the tool was created by my mentor, but even the archetypes were not created by her. Okay.
Yes.
So that source material has come from many different sources, and it is there available. She created the tool for it, and I'm creating the soul. Well, we together, because she's my mentor and my partner. Developing soul sales as an application of it. Okay. So the soul sales archetypes, they're the same archetypes as in the soul language specifically. There's 7 archetypes and 7 aspects. When I'm talking about your soul sales archetype, I'm often blending in your essence, your role. 2 of the aspects, role and approach, is usually the best one to say this would be your soul sales archetype, right? And I often speak specifically to that, your way of going about things, the way of communicating, your way of being in business and sales. Yeah.
So your way of being in business and sales. So soul sales language is a way that you can help other people who are in business and who are also specifically in sales to be able to do it from a place. And I don't want to use language that isn't quote unquote the right language to discuss it. So I think of it all as being in alignment or doing it from this place of natural genius or your brilliance or where you're most comfortable. And you talk about it from like inside your comfort zone. So, but before we go there, can we just talk about just a little a synopsis, and I have this great PDF from you that like names the 7. Just can we just like name the 7 and then just give a little tiny drop of each one, and then we can dive a little more deeply into the specifics that I want to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. So 7. So we'll start with the first one, which is helper energy. So helper energy, the essence of a helper is all about serving in a nurturing kind of way. And when I say serving, I mean like actually serving like the common good. Like often you'll see these people behind the scenes serving the bigger vision, doing the things, getting the coffee. They don't necessarily have to be a server in a restaurant, but there's this energy of serving. You want to think of, I don't like using big names, but you think of like a Mother Teresa, like a one who's actually in there doing the serving and the nurturing. their approach to things, when you think from a sales perspective, or even it's not just sales, how they approach anything in life is often fairly reserved. It's kind of a very moderate way of being. They're not
Yes.
loud and excited and all this. They're very kind of like, right? They're like a little bit reserved in the way they do things, right?
Yes,
So
go
yeah,
ahead. It just
that's
makes
your
me
helper.
think. I often say, like, so many spiritual teachers tend to have that more reserved approach, and I always laugh because I'm like, I'm still called to do what I do, but my energy is like really different. And I think of, I laugh because one of my dearest teachers, he is just so like measured, and he's no longer with us, but he's measured and he's calm and he's so deeply
Mm,
compassionate and he's wise and he's
yeah.
reserved, and I'm just like, I just laugh because, oh, I love that energy. I know so many helpers, and how
Yeah.
lucky we are, like, to have
It's
them, right?
it's really yeah, helper energy, there's a lot of, I don't know the percentages again of the different archetypes, but there's a big percentage of helpers in the world. Because how do we not function with helpers in the world? Helpers,
Like,
nothing gets done. Without helpers and warriors, nothing gets done.
yeah, okay. So,
Okay, but helper energy, often people will know that they're helper energy when they are really fulfilled by serving someone else's vision and goal.
okay, that's
They
what
don't
that
need, they don't really need their own. They're solely happy actually being that support person. They're really a supportive
like,
role for energy.
yes,
Yeah.
I totally
Got
hear
it?
you.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I have friends who like, and how do I say this? So you think about like somebody like an Oprah or somebody who's famous or whatever, and
Yeah.
they always have their assistant. And
Yes.
so they're the ones who are helping them get their ass out on stage
Absolutely.
and take
So
care of things behind the scenes.
right. So they always say, we always say that a perfect partner for a king is a helper.
Mm.
Because king energy is all about, let's flip to the other side. King energy is all about leading, right? And directing, leading and directing. And
And
it's
you
great if
know
they
a
have help.
little bit about that, don't you,
What's
Lisa?
that?
You know a little bit about that, don't you,
A little bit
Lisa?
about it. Yeah, king energy is leading and directing. It's yeah, it's those people that you just like, I'd follow them kind of anywhere, and I don't even know why. They might not even know. I don't have to. I could be the person in the room that knows the least amount of information, and people still seem to want to follow me. And I'm like, why are you following me? I don't know anything, right? But they pick up on that energy. They've done that my whole life, and I didn't realize. But that's kind of the energy that people get from me sometimes. They're just like, oh, follow, like, and honestly, half the time I'm saying, really, me? Because I don't, but that's the energy. Now
Do
you see,
kings wait, do kings like to be kings? Like, do kings like to lead? Do they like the responsibility of being a
yeah. So,
leader?
so here's the thing. I'm glad you used the word responsible. So responsible is also one of the key indicators when somebody is king energy. Kings will feel a strong sense of responsibility for like everything. Too much sometimes. Too much
Mhm.
sometimes. They take
Mhm.
responsibility for things. So what's interesting about, do kings like to be kings? For the most part, everybody likes to be what they are. I know. I'm always, sometimes I see people and I thought, oh, I thought they were going to be like more sagey, and all of a sudden they're a warrior. And I thought, oh no, I got to deliver this, and they're not going to be happy. I've never had anyone go, oh, I wish I was this. They actually go, oh yeah, that is me. That feel right. So
Yeah.
we mostly want to be ourselves.
Yeah.
Now, the caveat there is, I have a client who was showing up and being warrior energy for the longest time. And her report even showed dominant warrior, although when it was assessed, we were like, this doesn't make any sense. She's probably a king energy, but she's showing up in warrior. And then we did some work to recognize, oh, and it does feel better for her to be in king energy. Right. So she validated. That's why about the tool not being the tool. Well, it still was kind of saying this doesn't make sense. She
Oh,
seems more king.
can
Yeah,
I play off of what you just shared?
sure.
Because, and I can use my own personal experience, but I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone at all because I have a lot of, entrepreneurial friends. And one of the things that we often find is that a shit ton of the marketing approaches
Mhm.
are things that we go, but I would never do that. I don't want to do that. That
Yeah.
doesn't feel like
Yeah.
a good fit for me. So can
Yes.
approaches, right, in marketing can
Yeah.
have certain energies that if you're a particular archetype, does that make sense? It might feel like, ew,
Absolutely.
icky.
Absolutely. So first of all, I will tell you that most people don't feel good about old school selling techniques, even though they work very well, because they are based in warrior energy. Okay. So you think about the warrior, and warrior energy is beautiful, by the way. None of the energies are good or bad. Let's get clear on that. And they're not better just because king sounds like a big role, especially right now. We got a new king in England. King is not, and you can say queen. For anybody out there is like, why is it male? It's not male, actually. Soul language does not care if you're male or female or non-binary or whatever. It doesn't care at all. The names, the archetypes that came out, you want to say priest or priestess, soul language does not care. You know, it's that idea that, you know, you might be a woman now and you'll be a man next lifetime. I don't know, but it doesn't care. So I just want to make sure I say that to people who might be getting triggered a little bit by like, how come it's not queen? Well, say queen. It's absolutely perfect to say queen. Look, we had a queen in England. They had a queen for 70 years. You know, it's like, it doesn't really matter. The energy is not sexual. So at the, where was I saying? Oh,
we're talking about warrior
energy, because if you think about warrior energy is, it's kind of a fighting energy. It's an active energy. Okay. So warriors can just love challenges. In fact, they don't just love them, they need them. If warrior doesn't have a challenge to fight for or against, they will create one, even if it's with themselves. Because warriors need a challenge and they need victories. They need to win. And not from a perspective of arrogance. It's a core honor. Yes. It's that going into battle. And it's powerful and beautiful. You think about activists, right? Like I know with all the racial injustice stuff going on in the US right now, you can see the warriors that come out, you can see whether they're in their love or fear. Are they fighting, raging against the machine, or are they fighting for equity and for justice and for human kindness and for, there's a devotion and a persistence, and they'll be an activist and a lobbyist for 50 years and they won't stop. And you'd be like, man, I wish I had that energy. They just don't give up. There's a persistence, there's a stamina, there's a showing up, right? So that's warrior energy. It works in sales the old traditional way, because you can think about the salesman carrying the bag, knocking on the doors, got rejected. That's fine. Next door. That's fine. Next door. They can just go. And they want to win the sale, and they'll go to 50, they'll get 50 no's and they'll still be knocking on door number 51.
Okay.
Right. So that's warrior. And that's a warrior energy.
Yeah. I love that. Cause that makes me think of, you know, there's these iconic stories, and, you know, even as a vegan, it pains me to say it, but we'll talk about like KFC, the Colonel, right? He literally, the legend goes that he got turned down like 101 times.
Yeah. I just keep going and going.
In it so much. And he's like, I'm just going to keep going and keep going and keep going, you know? Yeah. So we mentioned, and we don't have to do it for every single one.
Yeah.
But let's just give the listeners a taste of, you know, when we talk about the spectrum of the rainbow. Okay. So if a warrior is in that place, that imbalanced place of tipping into, let's call it the negative or whatever, how might it show up? Okay.
So a warrior energy. So warriors can be powerfully persuasive and convincing. It's actually very convincing energy. They're very convincing. However, it can be very overwhelming and astounding. It is someone's like fighting you on something. So their energy can be highly motivating. Like they can get people to move. They can get people into action. It's super motivating. Think about it. Come into battle with me. Like, come, we're going this way. We're going to fight this challenge and we're going to win. So it can be highly motivating, and it can be highly overwhelming. That's the opposite of it. Remember, it's a fighting energy. So it's like either you're feeling that devoted fighting for something, or someone's fighting kind of against you. Like it gets a little fixated, right? It's like, you want to buy this thing. I don't really want to buy this thing. Sure, you want to buy this thing. You want to buy it now? You want to buy it now? And you're like, okay, like enough.
Like, a little breathing room, a little pause, a little hit the pause button or whatever.
Yeah, it's that persistence can be a positive thing until it becomes a fixated thing.
Yes.
Right? That's the energy shift that you get with a warrior energy.
Yeah, when they say something like, oh, it's like she's like a dog with a bone or something, right?
Dog with a bone, right? And a dog with a bone can be a positive thing or a negative thing, right? Because it's just like, oh, they're a dog with a bone. I wish I could be like that. They just don't give up. They don't give up. It's so great. Versus like, man, they just don't give up.
Right.
You see, it's the same energy. It's the same energy. Yes. But when it comes across from fear, stress, and overwhelm, it will feel like, man, they just don't give up. So you'll see someone who's like got some warrior energy, and they stay in a marriage for 20 years, even though they're being abused or whatever, because they're fighting for it and they won't let it go. And so they can, so it's just like, can you let it go? Like, right. They can get fixated on the challenge of it. So
could that show up? And I don't know if could that show up in the role of like codependence and stuff as well, when you're enabling and you're staying in things or supporting things that may be like you're saying,
it can't possibly. It's because it will become, because they're almost like, it's that energy of like needing to fix it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's 3 of
Yeah.
the 7.
Yeah. So that's really fun. Let's say artist. So we'll go with artist energy. So artist energy is, okay. Kings and warriors are all about action. So you know somebody who's like, oh my gosh, they're just so action, 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 action. They've probably got a lot of warrior king in them. May not be dominant, but they've got a lot of warrior king energy. They want to move forward.
Yeah.
Warriors want to make stuff happen and move forward. Kings want to like direct and tell people.
She's pointing, just so you know, guys, she's like pointing to the camera. She's pointing around at things.
You do this, you do that, you do that. Let's move. Right. Whereas the warriors are like, let's go, come with me. Right. So that's the difference in the energy. We talked about helper energy being serving. And a lot of people think, oh, but I love to serve. I must be helper energy. It's not the same. The serving is the doing. Priest energy is similar to helper in that they are led by the inspiration. The way warriors and kings want action, helpers and priests want inspiration. But priests do it from a broader perspective, like kind of they want to serve the higher good. And how they serve the higher good is through their compassion. They're great at advising others because people feel seen and heard when they're with the priest energy. It's just like, oh, I feel like you're just going to put your arms around me and give me a big hug. Like they feel that.
I love that.
But their approach is super passionate. There's a lot of passion to it. You think about that and it's not religious people, but we use the word priest because you think about somebody on the pulpit, like preaching with passion, their beliefs. And there's a little bit of that with priests, whether they're religious or spiritual or not at all, there's still that energy. Often you will see archetypical salespeople as priests too, but they're the ones that you see and they're not go, go, go. You see them as like, oh, you've got to buy this. I've got the priest inspiration too.
Yeah, I feel
the priest approach. Oh my gosh, you got to buy these glasses. They're so fabulous. They're kind of tiny. They've got these like great stripes. Like they're just so awesome. I love them. You're going to love them too. That's priest.
That lands for me in a lot of ways too.
Yeah. So again, the approach is passion. It doesn't mean no one else has passion.
Sure.
It means that the way that a priest energy goes about things is with their passion.
Yeah.
That's how they create their buy-in with their passion. That makes sense.
Well, because it's like getting swept up in somebody else's enthusiasm and excitement.
Yes. And that's really the energy of it is charismatic energy, excitement. And that other side of the rainbow is fanatical, obsessed, and overzealous. It's like, okay, enough already. We get it. You love it.
Yeah. I'm just saying I can recognize some of that big time. But
absolutely. But let's talk
about artists. You were going to talk about artists. And then
artists and sages, I like to do them in pairs because you get the sense of the energy. Artists and sages are all about expression. The way kings and warriors need to act, priests and helpers need to be inspired. Sages and artists needs to express, but artists usually express through form, which doesn't mean they have to be a painter or a sculptor. They could be an engineer, an inventor. There's lots of ways people express, but they are all about expressing through form, creativity, innovation, something new, brand spanking new. That's how artists work. Sages express more through communication. And sages, they love to create too, but they don't need something innovative and new. They'll take other pieces of other people's stuff. It's like, I always like the example of a tile. Instead of like creating a new tile pattern, they would break all the other ones, take pieces of them, put them together and create a new mosaic from all the other tiles. Or if they're a songwriter, instead of writing a brand new song, they'll take an old song and put it to new music and sing it in a new way. Right. So they're still creative, but it's usually through communication. So because sages love to express with and through others. They love an audience. They love an echo. There's just, And then you've got your scholar, and scholars' energy is kind of neutral. They're the true assimilators. So the scholars are the ones that bring things from the past into the future. They're the true knowledge transfer, because scholars can't get enough of learning. So we all might like to learn, but the kings like me like to learn enough until we've mastered it and then put the books away. A scholar, it's their bread and butter. It's like breathing. Scholars need to learn, and they love details, and they love diving into things, and they love to also then teach it.
So learning for the sake of learning.
Yes.
Is the pursuit of knowledge, and then sharing it, like you said, teaching it with others.
Yes.
So one of the things that you did on Emmeline's podcast that I thought was so fantastic, and I could totally relate as an Apple and Mac user, hardcore devoted for like 35, whatever it's been. Never used anything that wasn't Apple. So I'm a very devoted. I've spent a lot of time in an Apple store, and we were talking about, all right, you give us an example of a sales approach at an Apple store using the different archetypes, and it was fantastic because everyone that you did, I'm like, I've met that person. I'm like, I've experienced that person. And I think, no, I'm sorry Android users, but I think you can get the gist of going into an electronics store
Yeah.
and you're looking for like a new computer or whatever. And can we just do a fun little exercise of
Yeah.
what that might sound like? And
Absolutely.
you can pick whatever order you want to do them in. I'm
Perfect. I will. And I'll tell you that usually when I do soul sales, it's a blend of the role and the approach. So it can get a lot more complex than what we're talking about. It's like I have king energy, which is very directive, but I also have the approach of the priest. And I have the approach of the king too, because when you have a dominant energy, you'll have all of the aspects. And then your soul likes to play in other energies to grow and learn and develop. So it's like I always say that I'm passionate. I have the passionate approach, like the priest, but I got king underlaying. So I'm assertively passionate.
Yeah. Okay. So, and just so the listeners, let's just explain this, right? We're not trying to dumb it down. We're like, just keep your mind and your heart and your ears open and understand that this is way more expansive. Remember, she said like
Absolutely.
7 aspects, 7 things, 49.
Yeah.
There's a lot more
Yeah.
going on.
98. Yeah.
But we're
Yeah.
just trying to give you a taste and a sip of how you might recognize this.
Yeah.
So, all right. So,
And the discerning piece I want you to really get, because people will latch onto a word that's more about a doing than a being. So this is where the depth really is. It's more of a being. So someone will say, well, I lead, I must be king energy. No, the energy of kings is there's a dominant underneath. It's like the thing that they can't not be is the leader. Often they just be the leader in the room or whatever. And you had mentioned the key thing for kings is responsibility. See, all the other archetypes don't want the responsibility. The kings are willing to take it and willing to do that. And that's why it's a differentiator a little bit. It's like they'll be responsible for things, even though, so the responsibility lies with that energy because they have the energy of leading. They need the responsibility. They need to be able to take that on. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that it's like saying, so we have a sneaking suspicion that I'm sage with like priest approach, right? Or whatever. We don't know. We haven't done my thing yet. But
and look, I'm wrong a lot of the times. I want people to recognize that as much as I master the language and I work with the language, I'm wrong a lot of times in the dominant part, because what happens is you might recognize, and people are going at home right now, oh, I know what my spouse is, because it might be the approach that they are taking that is really screaming really loud. Or people will mix up the energies a little bit, like, oh, is that warrior or is that king kind of thing. So it's not about that, but you can just recognize that what we're going to do with soul sales is show people that, guess what, you don't have to do it all the way. So we've already given you the warrior door to door, like fixated, like which computer do you want? I'm here. Let's go. I'm going to get you the best one. You know what? You can't buy it today. Great. Should I follow up with you tomorrow? Like that's a warrior energy. Okay. Like, that's fine. You know what? I'm here tomorrow between 6 and 5. What time would you like to be here? That's a very warrior. Go. Okay?
Check.
And we've already said the priest one, which again, you go in to buy an iPad and you want to know which one's the best. And the priest energy is like, oh, I love this new one. It's so brilliant. The screen's so big. The colors are so vivid. It's like boom, 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 So there might be a story, you know what? My little niece, she was 3 years old and she dropped hers and it just bounced and didn't break. And, like there'd be a whole thing around it. They love telling stories. Priests love to tell stories and analogies. That's when you know you're in a priest energy.
Got it.
Got it? Yeah. Okay. Helper energy, which is really reserved, are brilliant at customer support. How can I support you in buying this computer? Well, which one's the best one? Well, what would you be using this for, kind of thing. They're going to support you. And so that's the best way. If anybody's got a lot of helper energy, how do you support the person in buying into what you need them to buy into? It's all about serving. And when they look from the lens of serving, they'll feel better because they don't have to be telling stories and being funny.
Is the helper approach, do they tend to, not necessarily like scholars, but do they tend to be good listeners? Do they ask questions to be of service, do you think?
Well, the approach is quite reserved, so they may not. And the downside of helper energy, unfortunately, is often they take themselves out of the game. Like they don't know, right? So the energy, remember, is through inspiration. So when they feel really inspired to serve someone, then they probably will ask a good question, or they'll be there. And they might not know. See, they might not ask good questions because they may not be trained. That's why I train people. How do you ask a question in a way that feels really good for a helper. Helpers may be too shy. That's the downside of the energy again, is they become too
Yes.
reserved. They're restrained. The reservation goes into restrained, and I won't say anything because it's not up to me to pick their computer.
Yes. Who at home is hearing that right now and going, yeah, like raising your hand, little double amen on that one or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
right? So we're
Right?
trying to
Yeah.
recognize maybe aspects of these things. So,
Yeah.
okay.
So that would be but I think they're great customer service people. And I think they can be great salespeople when they remember, hey, guess what? Selling to someone is just supporting them and making the best decision.
Perfect. I love that little reframe. I
You see
love
how
that.
the helpers out there are going, oh my gosh, Lisa, that's so much better than having everyone's telling me I have to sell through stories. Guess what? Helper energy, don't try to sell through a story.
Say it again. How can they be wicked effective?
Okay, because if someone out there is saying stories sell, you have to sell stories. They're not wrong. Stories sell. But for helpers, how do you support this person? Supporting them might be actually telling a story. But if you look at it through if helpers look at it through the lens of how could I support them in this right now, they'll know if a story is the right thing to do. Okay.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
That's
And
very different, right?
yeah, I have a couple of questions just off of that one thing, but I want to keep going and then I'll
So
swing it back
artists,
around.
let's talk about the artists. Artists, the challenge with artists artists approach is very cautious. So it's not moderate, it's cautious. Okay. They're very prudent. So they might ask questions, but the way an artist asks questions, it's almost like they're picking at things. And they'll probably bring up the objections before the salesperson. However, you can recognize artist energy because they'll be super creative. They're more apt to be the one that says, well, if you're doing all that with your computer, you could just buy the base model and actually add on extra memory. And maybe you should pick up one of these. All of a sudden,
I've talked to that person too.
there's 6 options and they actually are discussing an 8th one. And you're like, does that exist? They're like, yeah, we just create it. I was like, they go right to like
Innovative.
smashing what's available and creating something completely new because that's what they do. They innovate. They're problem solvers
Yes.
in a creative way.
I
So that's
appreciate that. I
yeah,
remember,
that's
I
you.
can specifically remember talking to that guy at the Apple store and him saying, you don't need to get all that memory. Do this, do this, do this. Just get the exact thing. He's like, just get the
Yeah.
base and then get an external hard drive and then do this. And
Yeah.
and
So
my
here's
brain just started to spin because I'm like,
yeah.
that's like,
Now,
oh.
so he could have been artist energy because it's a cautious approach, and I'm not great at that one, to be honest, because it's so not mine. But there's like a little bit of I don't know. There can be some anxiety around the way they sell. Like, I don't know, it's super cautious. It's like,
Yeah, I'm
I
with
don't know
you.
how else to describe it. King energy, because you described it a little bit. The guy could have had a lot of king energy because kings are very assertive and directive, remember. So if, even my approach could be someone come in and say, I want this and this. I'm like, well, then don't do that. Go here, then here, and then here. Do A, B, and C. It's faster and it's cheaper. That would be king energy. It's faster and it's cheaper. Go here. Artist energy is more creative in that way, innovative solutions. So it'll be more, you see the difference between them?
I do see the difference.
The
Yeah.
king is directive in it. In fact, it's like, you know what? I wouldn't do that. I'd build your own. Go talk to Jimmy. He's great at building computers. See that? The king would say,
Yes.
Jimmy's great at that and
Yeah.
he'll know what to get you. Go see Jimmy. See the direction. It's directive and it's assertive and like, stop looking at all these. Go see Jimmy.
That's
Don't listen
perfect.
to what that person said. Go over here. That's kingy. That's
So
king.
a kingy can be a little bossy pants when not
Bossy
balanced.
pants. Absolutely bossy pants. All you bossy pants that you were bossy Betties when you were 5 years old on the playground and people were like, man, she's bossy. Yes. Leadership and training. That's
Oh,
what
I love it so much. All right. And then the scholars.
Scholar energy. Scholars are brilliant at details and observations. They don't even realize they're picking up on details and things that other people don't. They just soak it all in. It's just like intuitive for them. So they'll understand a lot of details and stuff. They'll also be the person at the Apple store who just knows everything. Like they just know everything. They don't just know there's RAM that's in, I don't know computers. That's why I'm making up this language, but
yeah,
they're the person that you go in there and they're not very excited about choices. They're not really giving you their opinion about anything. They're not super excited. They're literally like, it depends what you're going to use it for. Oh, okay. Well, that's just that. Well, this one's better for this and this one's better for that.
so they're almost in a way, like they present a non-biased thing. They're like, just the facts, ma'am.
Just the facts, ma'am. Unless something's been tested, right? So if you go into an Apple store, they'll say, well, you should buy Apple. They're the best, but they'll have a reason for it. All these computers were tested and this one came out on top. So it's the best. They're not emotional about it.
Information.
It's like applicable. They like to test things. They're the pro con people. All the people out there going, look, I did the list. I did the pros and the cons and this one came out on top. That's the choice. So
Okay.
they're also the person who has this expertise, this depth of knowledge that, you're just like, I'm going to buy from that guy just because, man, he knows a heck of a lot about computers that I know nothing about.
And if he knows a lot about them, something in me feels like I can trust that maybe.
Absolutely. But here's the thing. This is the interesting part. This is why we train people to be in their own soul language. Because
That's where I was going next. Perfect.
Emily,
Good segue.
perfect. So Emily was a great, great person to play this game with, because if you remember the interview with Emily, we talked about her selling mattresses. And she said, they wanted me to give all the customers all the information and all the details about all the mattresses. And I just wanted to share with them my story about how when I was little, or there was some mold in my mattress or something. Now, here's the thing. She trying to give all the details of a scholar is not going to come across energetically. People will not feel like she knows everything. They may hear that she knows a lot. Okay, yeah, she's got all the details there. But energetically, they won't feel like she's the expert. It'll feel a little bit forced or weird, or like she's reading from a spec sheet.
Yes.
Okay,
like
she studied. She's a good little employee and she read all the details and now she's conveying them to us. That's what it's going to feel like. Now, if Emily's allowed to be free in her sales thing and talk about her experience, people are going to be so drawn in by that.
Yes.
They still might not make the choice that she made. They might make their own, but they'll want her to help them because they'll feel like they connect and that she understands them, right? You see, that's the
Okay, so yeah, I do 100. So let's point to this. Let's go here because I could take this in 3 different ways, but I want to make sure because this is really important. So you say that sales is a conversation, not a presentation.
absolutely.
And you also talk about how growth can happen inside of our comfort zones and selling inside of our comfort zones. And
Yeah.
so was that kind of an example of what you were talking about when Emily was allowed to stay in her comfort zone or her true
Yes.
energy,
Yeah.
she's way more effective. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Absolutely. So sometimes the paradigm shift is, guess what? There's growth available inside your comfort zone because we've all been told you have to go outside of it. I'm bringing people back home to their energy, their own dominant energy and the wing energy that they're playing, and come home to that. And guess what? Home is a really comfortable place to be. It's comfortable. It's juicy. It feels good. That's why I'm like almost redefining for people what comfort is, because society has made us think comfort's bad. Can't be in your comfort zone. It's like, look, sitting on the couch doing nothing but binge watching Netflix is not comfortable for anybody. If we learned nothing in lockdown, it was that. It's comfortable when we're tired and when we need some entertainment, but there's a limit.
Yeah.
So I would say be in that place. For me, you're being in your comfort zone is that place that actually feels really good. It feels expansive. It feels like natural. It doesn't feel lazy and stagnant. It feels good and juicy. Now, the growth of it is this. So let's use poor Emily. I hope Emily listens to this, and Emily, we love you for it, but it's a perfect example. If somebody had the foresight to say, hey, guess what? Emily's got a lot of little, like, say, we're going to call it priesty energy right now. I think she's got different energy as well, but let's just say the approach was priesty in the sense of telling stories.
Sure.
Because sages also love to share experiences, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's use you and that experience. So say you're using a sagey approach. Sage approach is actually authority or power. It's like people feel the experience of a sage. It's not they don't feel the expertise, but they feel the experience. It's all the gurus out. Guru is a bad term, but anybody out there is an influencer. Sages' energy is around influence. So kings are about leadership, but sages are about influence, because sages have a beautiful way of communicating knowledge, experience, and new insights. It's a blend. So sages are best to share experiences with people because they'll feel that influence of that. That's why influencers on YouTube share experiences and people are like, So if you were selling mattresses and someone had the foresight to say, what if we stop making her like the expert on all the facts about mattresses and we let her be her, and you're allowed to be in your saginess, okay? Growing inside your comfort zone means recognizing what you call the rainbow.
Yeah.
It's being well aware when your authority, your expert, that she's that influencer turns into patronizing.
Yes.
Because that's the thing. When you're coming from fear and stress and overwhelm, that like, wow, she really knows what she's talking about, comes across as like oppressive.
Doing the finger pointing thing, the finger wagging.
Being spiritually connected is the only way to go from story to glory, see what I mean? Right. It becomes this like,
I like that impression. That's really funny.
not that you do that,
No,
but
I know what you
we're just playing with it, right? But this is what I always talk about when I say, hey, there's availability to grow inside your comfort zone. Because when I was confirmed for me that I was king energy, and guess what? My whole life I was told I was a natural born leader. All my life, it wasn't something I signed up. Well, I did sign up for it. My soul did, but I was told it my whole life. But it wasn't like soul language. I go, oh, yep, great, king. That's what I thought, and I move on. Like I'm working with it every day and every week and every month to say, how am I showing up in that? And am I trying to have the answers for everybody? Well, guess what? Kings don't have all the answers. They're just great at leading people to their own and to put things together and to put the pieces of the puzzle together and move the players on the chessboard. It's not my role to do all the pieces. It's like, can you grow inside? That's the inside your comfort zone piece, is like really sink into like, oh yeah, I'm a fabulous communicator. Can I be more aware of when I'm moving along that spectrum between fear and love?
Yes.
And when that saginess is really opening people up and really connecting with other people and really, adding to the world what you're meant to add. I mean, there's a reason why, we've got sages and kings and warriors and our souls want to play in other energies so that we can recognize each other and we can play and we can grow. My king energy is playing an artist. I have a lot of artist energy, right? So that I can learn, my interpretation of this is that so I can be a better king, having played in the priest and the artist energy, so that when I'm leading people in those energies, I know how to lead them.
That
right.
Makes so much sense. And part of the equation that we haven't talked about yet in this, because we're talking a lot about self-knowledge, but sales is a two-way street, right? So part of the gift of this, and I think how do I say this? For me, and again, you're the sales expert, so you can correct me, please.
Yeah.
But I think what good sales requires is that we pay deep attention, that we listen, that we're aware, that we know who the fuck's in front of us and who we're talking to, because our approach, like I think you said it once, like your energy doesn't shift. Like you don't want to shift energies to placate somebody else, but you show up here, but you got to know who you're talking to. Am I kind of in the ballpark?
Yes.
Okay.
So the foundation of sales, of course, when I teach sales, the foundational pieces are that you're in a conversation, not a presentation, which means there's two ways. It's a two-way street. If you're doing all the talking, you're either interviewing someone or you're presenting to them. You're not having a conversation with them. So the curiosity, the conversation, the openness to who's in front of you, the intention to find an alignment and a compatibility between what you offer and what they want. All of those things are the foundational pieces that I work with the soul language. Okay. So those are the baseline. I'm very big to help people because people don't really get this. And a lot of the sales trainings programs have taught people to identify different buyer types and then speak to the buyer types. But the training is almost like being one type of a salesperson instead of appreciating your own. So as a dominant king energy, if I'm sitting in front of an artist, for example, I don't all of a sudden do the approach of the artist. My approach is assertively passionate. Let's just call it that. That's the priest king blend. I'm assertively passionate with an artist and with a scholar and with a helper. However, when I recognize there's 7 aspects, right? One of the ones I like to talk about is mindset, for example. So the artist's mindset is naturally skepticism. and thank goodness it is. Because they're skeptical, they can innovate and create brand new things because they break everything down and build it up to something different, right? So skepticism, it can be very, very positive when it's on the positive side, but also on the negative side, it's not trusting. Yes. It's people that are super. So we don't want to change that. But when I can recognize someone in front of me is asking questions in a way that I'm like, wow, okay, I can hear the skepticism from them. I don't want to try to make them not skeptical, because guess what? If that's their mindset, they're not going to not be skeptical, right? But they're investigating. And so my assertively passionate approach now is I want to find out what they're skeptical about and how I can speak to that.
I think I wrote down something you said in one of your workshops. What do I need to know about this person to help them and me?
Oh, did I say that? I'm glad you captured those things. Absolutely. I think that's one of the best curiosities that you can go into a conversation about. And it is part of the training that I do with people is when we start breaking down your conversation and what it is that you're about. And hey, look, all you parents out there, you can do this with your kids too. So when you're going into a situation and you really need to be more enrolling them than lecturing them, get curious instead of like, you know, like what is it that you need to know to really understand the situation? You know, and what do they need to know to understand the situation? You can start to get curious about that. So the biggest message here is that you get to stay in your own natural approach, especially once you're really clear on what that is. And some of us are playing in multiple approaches. So that's can be good or bad. Sometimes I've had clients where they have 5 approaches. And what ends up happening as we dig deeper into their role, I had a woman, she had a team of 30 people she managed.
Wow.
And I said, so here's the thing, 5 approaches, it's great. It does mean you can take different approaches with different people. However, it also means it can be super confusing for people. They don't know which one of you is showing up. Who do we get today? Do we get the scholarly version who's micromanaging us, or do we get the artist who's skeptical that we're going to do anything that she tells us, or are we getting the sage who's super visionary and leaves us all in the dust? Like they may not know that, and that's probably what was happening with her in that environment.
I love that. And it was a perfect moment for me I've been holding on to this question for this whole time. So I'm glad you just brought that up. So I'm like, oh, STOTJ, spiritual team on the job. Thank you. Because somebody like you who works with a shit ton of leaders, right? You go into companies, you do work with individuals. Obviously, we're going to talk about that too. But you also go in and you help people with their teams, like managers and higher ups and stuff. So I've been dying to know since you first said it, when you were talking about when you made the decision to leave corporate, even though you loved your new boss, you loved the new CEO, whatever, and you said he was an incredible leader.
Absolutely.
And I was like, I couldn't wait to ask, to you, what made him a great leader? Because you're talking about now this woman who shows up with 5 different leadership styles and people like, I don't know. So what was it about him? Was he just really consistent? Was he in his energy? Like what do you think made him great?
It's so funny I haven't thought of it from the language of soul language, actually, that you asked me, but I a couple of years ago, I was on a phone call with him. I hadn't spoken to him in years. And I said how great he was. And he's like, you never told me that. I said, I've never told you that. Doesn't make any sense. But I'll give you how he showed that from day one. Okay. So the boss that I was struggling with, I remember particularly in most of her meetings, she would put a PowerPoint slide up and give the norms, the meeting norms, right? All the rules basically you got to play with. And one of the norms that she put on the slide was fun. We have to have fun as a team. That's one of our norms. And I was like, I mean, it's hilarious, right? It's absolutely hilarious, right? So I'm going to show you, this would demonstrate hopefully this little story as my priesty approach. So she comes in and puts a rule that we have to have fun. Okay. Yeah. Fun governor. Yeah. He came in, dumped a bag of Nerf arrows on the table and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. The 2 other directors are down the hall having meetings with their teams, and we're going to walk in and we're going to shoot them with the Nerf arrows. We're not going to say a word, and then we're just going to leave.
So fantastic.
And they had no clue what was going on. Of course, they're in these like serious meetings. We come in, shoot these Nerf bullets at them, and then walk out as if it was a total normal day. Like, okay, what's next? Coffee? Great. You come back to the office and the looks on their face. I mean, it was fun. And here I worked in a very traditional buttoned up, wear a suit kind of office. So these things don't happen. We didn't
fresh air.
We didn't work at the Googleplex. This probably happens at the Googleplex all the time. But I just want to demonstrate the difference by that kind of a thing where he was the role model for what he spoke about. First of all, he fully showed up in everything that he believed. He saw people in his team. He used this is what I think about true leadership. I was saying about the king. Kings, it sounds like everybody would want to be a king, but they don't. Well, kings don't actually know everything. But what a king gets to know is their people, knows their strengths, knows when to use them, when to set them free, when they need to support them and do a little bit of their work. And that was him. He recognized who was at the table, and he created an environment that allowed you to be great in what you were great at.
I mean, that just made me so happy knowing that, and how
Yeah.
lucky you were to, even though you didn't stay,
Yeah.
and but
Yeah.
when we have leaders like that, one of my one-to-one clients who runs a really powerful and amazing and important nonprofit, she says, when leaders get better, we all benefit.
Oh, absolutely.
And
And
so,
he reminds me of the Vince Lombardi quote that is, win their hearts and they'll follow you anywhere. And I saw something on LinkedIn the other day, and someone said the secret sauce to being a great leader is caring about your people. And I added the comment, the secret sauce is actually letting them know.
yes,
Communicating in a way that they know, that they understand that, and they feel that is different than just, so
that just, I just love that so much. I just, like, my heart, I'm like, I just felt myself get a little emotional. So I'm like, yeah,
yeah.
it's so true, because um it's one thing to recognize something in other people. It's a whole next level to take the time to write a card or leave a note or let them know or say something or whatever,
Yeah.
like taking that
Yeah.
next step, you know what I
And
mean?
here's the piece too I want to make sure I put out there, because there's a lot of talk around, people use the word leader so loosey goosey nowadays,
Yeah.
and it gets watered down. I love soul language, because soul language, believing in soul language is solidified for me that not everybody is meant to be a leader. It doesn't mean you can't lead. It doesn't mean at some point in your life you're not going to lead something. However, it should be very liberating for other people, because everybody said, you got to lead, you got to lead. No, we all impact and influence each other.
Amen.
Absolutely. We do that. You show, just whether you're paying attention, whether you're giving someone, your full time, whether you're making I mean, there's so many ways in which we all impact and influence, but we don't need to all be a leader of people. That is, there's an energy with that. And so, if you're say, if and I keep saying but if your dominant energy is sage, your role here is to influence people with your guidance and your wisdom. You do not need to lead them. And when a sage hears that and lets go the need to have all the direction for leading people, and really appreciates the value of the influence they have through their insights and their guidance. It's like, guess what? You don't have to teach anybody anything. Let the scholars do the teaching, even guide people through your wisdom. And you don't have to create anything new. Let the artists create all the new stuff. Right. And the same to the leaders. You don't have to be the leader. Let the king energy take the responsibility of that. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to give people that. That's the biggest thing I like to give with people, is that, like, what if we recognize that we're all in this together, and we have a huge soul family of all the archetypes. You don't have to play them all.
I love that so much for so many different reasons. I wish we had 3 hours, because I'm like, I could just totally. So it's funny because I'm laughing because I did a podcast episode once and the title was literally "We're All Influencers." And I really do believe that. And the thing is that I'm hearing, and I can imagine if I ever do the assessment myself, which I'm totally fascinated by, of course. I'm like, I can just feel like my whole nervous system, like when you get permission like that, like what you just said, the whole nervous system just goes like, oh,
Yeah.
because I don't want to be like, it's the same thing. Like I've been an entrepreneur for like 20 years, but it's not how I first identify, even though I've been doing it for a wicked long time. Right. And so you hear all these things in the entrepreneurial world about like growing and scaling and leading in your team and whatever. And I'm like, I don't want to. I mean, I wouldn't mind like one team member. Like I like contracting people out, but I have no desire to be responsible for somebody else's livelihood. Like I have no desire to have a bunch of people that I need to organize and manage and run. And like, so I lack. So, we're sold all this idea of what success looks like or leadership looks like, or all the roles we have to play. And I'm always just over here like, I just want to be me. I want to be the best me I can be. I don't want to do all these
think about your helpers. Think about your helpers out there. Everyone says you have to have a big vision and you need to lead. And they're like,
what about me? Right.
they're really happy supporting someone else. Now they need to feel appreciated for it. Otherwise it doesn't go well for them. But you can, all the helpers want is the appreciation for the support they give. And that's the sweet spot for a helper.
Yes.
They get so much juice out of serving someone else's vision. Now that's opposite for the king. See, if the king's not leading, they don't want to do it at all.
Cranky.
You can see a king is like, they're either all in or all out. And kings will tell me that. I'm either all in or I'm all out. Absolutely. When are you all in? When you get to lead something.
Okay, I want to ask you a fun question because we're talking. It bounces right off of this. So, I made a little note to myself that I'm calling helpful hints and clues. So, somebody, and we're going to talk about how to work with you one-to-one and all that. That's how we'll wrap up. But if somebody, let's say, is like, wants to, maybe they're not going to do the full assessment, but they're like, how can I start to recognize this? So, and I wrote this, and you've already kind of answered this, but like, do you think our archetypes show up in us in our childhoods and how we were as children?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I love to use the themes that run through our whole life. So they will show up in childhood if they're allowed to. Sometimes, so our experiences, our environments, our parents, a lot of things will, throw those masks on us, right? As we know, we do
Yes.
spiritual work and radical self-awareness, that we get masks put on us, or we have an experience and it pulls us back and all those things. But your soul language is like sneaking out all the time, right? It's like, right? But it will show up. And so what I like is to look for the breadcrumbs and the themes and the threads that thing that, it's like, if you're really honest with yourself, what was showing up when you were a kid, when you were in middle school,
Yes.
when you were a teenager, when you're older, when you were at work, when you were at your family, when you were playing sports. Like if there's not one dominant thread, then you just there's some work to do in the awareness part. But like the thread for me with like the king stuff, it's not just that when I would go do an astrological reading or something, someone go, you're a natural born leader, because they did do that. Then you look at my astrology sign, I'm a Leo. It says, guess what? You're king of the jungle. You're a natural born leader. Like, and then I go into a work environment and I'm like the least experienced in the room. And all of a sudden I'm leading the workshop. And and when I was a little kid, so when I was on a baseball team, I was the back catcher and I used to boss everybody around and tell them where to go. Like,
No, not you.
right? Like, so it just shows up everywhere. And I want people to start noticing and identifying the energy underneath it. Because even kings lead even when they're not at the front of the room. There's a
Yes.
leadership energy around it. And same with artists. So they can't help but create and innovate. And artists are kind of funny because artists often are the no people. They literally are always breaking things almost and saying no to everything before they can say yes, because in their own intellectual mind, they're building a whole new thing.
Yeah,
Right?
I love it. I love it. And
So
I'm
that will
grateful.
show up. Yeah, that will
Yeah.
show up definitely. And that's what I want people to start. But I want you to feel the energy of it, not look at the job of it. Like, just because you're a teacher doesn't mean you're a scholar. In fact, most teachers are more priest energy than scholar energy. But the scholars end up being the PhDs who like study and study and study for years and years and years. That kind of shows a scholar energy. But scholar energy can show up in other professions as well. So it's not
Sure.
about the doing. I want you to feel the energy underneath it.
Yeah, so it's not the job title, it's how you're showing up in
it.
some ways, right? In it, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So two other things, and then I want to talk about how people can work with you and how you do that. But one of the things that you said one of the things that you said that, and I might have written it down wrong, and sometimes I can't read my own writing afterwards, but because you're talking fast and I'm thinking like, oh, I want to catch that. But something that you said that really stayed with me was your, like, because I know somebody might be listening to this and like, oh, fucking sales, like, oh, I just cringe, I retract when I hear sales, I go like, but you said I'm paraphrasing, but it was
Yeah.
something along the lines of your feelings about sales are basically representative of your experience with
Yeah.
sales, like how you've been sold to. Am I in the ballpark on what you said?
You are. And it's also, to expand on it, it also probably highlights one of your biggest values. So if it triggered you enough to give you that whole experience, often when I'm in a workshop, and probably the one you were in, I started with, I want you to think about a sales environment or situation, a specific one. Don't think about sales in general, but think of a specific one and how it made you feel.
Yeah.
Because and I gave you some examples of mine to say, I felt someone discounted me and made assumptions. Guess what? I hate assumptions. I hate assumptions. And I never want to assume. So it's guided me in my sales conversations to remember never assume anything. And just by not assuming, then I ask better questions. I get more curious. I leave an open space for somebody to surprise me. You know, that supports my sales. Instead of getting all upset about like, oh, I hate sales. People just don't listen and they just assume things. And, you know, it's that Pretty Woman moment, right? When she walks in and goes, yeah, remember you wouldn't sell me a dress? Big mistake. That's happened to me so many times, and I don't want to be that person. And so when I give people permission to say, well, guess what? You don't have to be that. And your very fear of being that is probably what means you never would anyway.
Yeah.
And so when you can recognize, when you can say, it triggered me. I never want to be that. What value does it hit in me? And how can I now show up? Completely contrary to that. And I'm already one step ahead of the game. It doesn't mean you're the perfect salesperson yet, but start there. Start with the fact that
what landed wrong for me and how it made me feel, what made me contract, what made me go,
What was your word? What was your word? Let's give them a different example than assumptions. What was yours when you think of a sales situation that you were just like,
well, it's along the line of assumptions. It's, you know, going to buy a car as a woman, and, you know, having the ability, I just sold a house or whatever. So having the ability to pay cash and be, you know, whatever, I'm female, my Boston accent, whatever assumptions people make about me that I'm stupid, talking down to me.
Patronizing. Okay. How beautiful is this? How perfect is this? Patronizing. Sage energy in its negative pole is patronizing. So it's great feedback for you to say, I don't ever want to be patronized.
Somebody feel this way.
Because I felt like he was patronizing me. I don't want to patronize, but I recognize my energy can be really powerfully authoritative. But you and over talk, if you go in fear and overwhelm and stress and over talking and all that, you could potentially do that. But the fact that you already have that as a flag in your mind already sets you up to say, I want to come from a more loving place and never patronize people. Powerful. Great. You see how that?
Yeah, no. Yeah. I think it's a great example. And I appreciate that. And so I'm just trying to think of these, like, again, under like helpful hints and clues, and then something else. And you may not remember these things. Like the things that land in me that I write down listening to other people always like, how do you remember that? I'm like, cause it landed in me. But I think something else you said that I thought was wicked fun and helpful is that people often say, so many people have like great gifts to offer, great programs to offer, great things, but they always feel like, oh, I suck at selling myself. But when I do a shout out about one of my best friends, or when I have an amazing experience at a restaurant, and I think something that you said, because I just remember it was, you're like, if you find it easier to sell for other people, notice your approach and your energy when you're doing that. Is that ringing a bell?
Absolutely. Yes. I love that you remember all these things. Fabulous. So I often, when I'm getting people to try to recognize their a natural approach, not often, always, I always take them out of a sales scenario, because sales has so much energy around it, right? There's so much fear of people pleasing and fear of rejection and fear of all these things. And so our natural approach, I always say, you know, the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And there's caveats to that, but let's just use that as the base. The way you do anything is the way you do everything. So I want you to start recognizing your approach when it's working really well for you in other circumstances. You can translate that into sales. Now, to one step further, to set you guys up for success and not to be frustrated, don't pick one where it was frustrating. Don't pick your natural approach when you know people weren't responding well and you weren't you were having your bad hair day and all those things. I want you to pick a time when you felt like, I would say there were times in corporate where I felt like a rock star. There were, and it wasn't like an arrogance thing. It was like, I nailed that. And not only was it, I didn't even know if it was really good for everybody, but it felt really good for me. I felt in my flow. I felt in my power. I felt the reception from people. Like I felt it, and I could look back and go, when was I really feeling like a rock star? Who was I being in that moment? Now, rock star may not be your word.
But, no. Yeah. So I'm looking at it though. Go ahead, finish. And then
I'm just saying, so I want people to fill in their other words. So someone else might not use rock star. Someone else might go, I really felt like connected. Oh, I was so connected to everyone. Great.
Mhm.
Connection's your word. How are you approaching things when you felt that connection?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it like from this point of view of I call it doing a love shout out, right? So I go and have a service or an experience or whatever with one of my friends. So like I'll use my friend Brett who I just did an interview with. So my friend Brett is like a genius extraordinaire chiropractor, strength and conditioning person, super duper smarty pants, totally a helper, like loves to help people get out of pain quickly, tap into their own healing ability, like all this shit. He's like fantastic. So I go and see him. When I come home, the first thing I love to do is like, I'm going to do a shout out on Facebook or social media, and I'm going to tell everybody about my experience and what he said and what we did. And I'm like, I love it. Like, I could sell all day. If I believe in a product or a person, give me
Super
the mic.
sagey.
Give
Super
me the,
sagey.
give me the
That's
mic
super
and let me go. But what I'm saying is, if I didn't hadn't ever met you and didn't even know that word sagey is applied to myself,
Yeah.
what you might say is, because I just want to give a living example, right? So what you might say is, so when you go get a massage or when you eat an amazing meal and you could taste the love in the food and you want to tell other people about it in some way, that to me, a testimonial or review, that's like a sale to me, right? I'm selling what my experience was. So what's my natural, this is how I'm thinking of it. So I want you to correct me if I'm not doing it right, because we're
Yeah.
representing your work here. But the
Yeah.
way I think about that is, what's my natural tendency where I feel really passionate, excited, like this is my favorite way to tell people about things or people or products or programs
Yeah.
or whatever. Am I kind of
Yes, you are. And it's it's possible until I know the actual assessment. I always say I could be wrong. But the energy of that is it's sagey and priesty. It's probably more priesty. That whole idea where you become you're super sold. You're super passionate. And so you're selling people with your passion. So for example, a lot of my friends and families own Roombas, you know, the automated
yeah.
vacuums. And a lot of them own air fryers.
Is that because of you?
Yes, it's because of me. And not because I really should put a link on my
You
Amazon
need an
page.
affiliate link. You need an
I
affiliate
should
link.
get it right. I should get the affiliate link, but I actually don't do it for the affiliate link. But I've sold them just on the passion. And I'll tell you, the other day, my girlfriend visited me, and she's now using her dishwasher. She's lived in her apartment for 5 years and never used the dishwasher. And I sold her on using her dishwasher the other day. You see how sales works? It's not just selling.
It's
My
not
friend
just,
is
it's
here,
not just
and
in
I'm like,
business.
"You're kidding me!" At the cabin where I am right now, I don't have a dishwasher. I said, "You're kidding me, right?" She's, "But I live alone." Blah 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 blah. Anyway, I'm like, you need to go home, and like this is a directive passionate thing, but you need to go home and start using the dishwasher. And I swear to you, you're going to come back to me in 2 weeks and go, "Oh my gosh, why was I not using my dishwasher for 5 years?" Guess what happens? She comes last weekend. "Oh my gosh, love my dishwasher." I'm like, "Of course you do." It's like, so the passionate side of me is, this is why you got to do it. It would be so much easier, and it would be and go home and do it and tell me how it is. That's the key.
Yeah, I love it. And so,
Yeah.
you guys,
So
I hope the
yeah,
listeners, I hope you're picking up what we're putting down. Like,
but
pay attention.
I want to make sure this last piece people get, because we've heard enough about me. I know I share myself a lot, but the sage piece. So you wanting to share your experience and your excitement, and it's like, you don't even have to sell. I'm selling people in that. You are selling people in that, and it will work for you because there's a truth to the energy underneath it.
I feel that.
Other people will be like, that never works for me. And when I do that, I feel like I'm convincing or persuading or manipulating people.
Yes.
Okay. And from them, it would feel like that.
But that's
So
the
if
beautiful
you were
thing.
coaching people, so this is it. So you were coaching people and saying, just do it this way. Or if I was saying to people, do it the way I just explained it. Don't do it the way I just explained it. Don't tell your friends, go do this now. Unless you've got some king energy. It works for me. It works for me. But I would never suggest a helper use that approach.
Sure.
Ever.
And a helper would feel awful doing that approach.
They would feel awful doing it. And the person across from them would feel awful receiving it.
And it would be awkward and it'd be weird and it'd be like, why are you being like this? Even if I like you, I'm like, this is icky. Like, and I've said that before. I'm like, I really like this person, but like, I don't want to be whatever. It's like, what I don't want to be on their email list anymore or whatever. And sometimes you can't explain it. You're like, something just feels out of alignment. It just doesn't feel right. Yes.
So that's the thing. Even though you yourself can appreciate, my priestly like energy, probably because you have some in your profile, is that if an artist all of a sudden went to a sales training and was taught to use that,
they'd be like, no.
you might be like even though you can appreciate the approach, it's the artist trying to like make themselves fit into that approach can come across again. So this is about that alignment piece. And so your most naturally effective approach, whether you're selling your teenager on cleaning their room, your friend on using your dishwasher, or a program that you want someone to buy, your natural approach is your best approach.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
I love that.
And the recognizing people in front of you, there's a whole nother piece to that. I just start people with recognize your own. And be in it. Lean in, get comfortable.
Look at 100%. You better know yourself before you try to start knowing other people and
be
telling
comfortable.
them to do shit.
Be comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah.
Your soul's already comfortable being that, but then you put that into the physical body. That's where we get tripped up. So get comfortable in your own skin by listening to your own soul language.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for that. And so if somebody's listening to this and they're like, hey, I have a team, and whether it's real estate or mortgages or cars, whatever the thing is, or I have a program and I have like two people on my sales team or whatever, anybody where they more than them, right? And they want to work with you. Obviously we're going to tell them how to get in touch with you, but can you just quickly just say, like, these are the ways that I work with corporations or teams or, more than one?
Yeah. The more than one, I always do the full team soul language, because there's a importance to not only knowing yourself, but when you're working in a team, it's great to understand others so we can see it makes sense. You're like, oh my gosh, why don't we just lean on our resident scholar over here who's going to like pull all the details out that we never thought of, so I like to do that with teams. So we'll do that with teams. And then the training specific, they don't all have to be salespeople, by the way, because you're selling. When I was in corporate, the majority of time, especially when I was in head office, I was selling the C-suite on getting time in front of them, on funding the project I wanted to do, on approving my documents faster, whatever. I was always selling, even when I wasn't a salesperson, right? So team doesn't all have to be salespeople. However, of course, we can do salespeople, but I actually love helping people with enrollment engagement that aren't salespeople, actually, because they've never been really taught how to leverage those skill sets. So that's what I do with teams. Individuals, I can just work with the leaders so they appreciate themselves more and they can understand if they want that work for themselves to be a better leader. And you don't need to be a leader to do your own soul language. What you need for me to work with you, this is the criteria that I have with people, because there's a non-negotiable for me. I won't sell you just the report. I'm a firm believer in this isn't about giving you an identity. It's not an identity. This is about activating a truth within you because you want to grow and learn and evolve in some way. My specialty is with business and sales, and I have marketing background and all that. To make it's like that cross between personal growth and business success is my sweet spot. But I work with people on their soul language and how do you show up fully? How do you communicate in a way that's effective for you? So you don't have to be selling for that piece of it. And I bring that in. And then I've got other people from our soul language partners that if it's more about a specific relationship piece, or it's more about your health or something like that, soul language might still be relevant for you. And I would put you to one of those experts.
Yeah, I love that. And so I'm also just thinking, and you don't even have to respond to this, but the way my brain is working is that I'm thinking like, and even if you have a team, when you have a team and everybody's soul language, how could that not help you be an effective leader? Because you know who you're talking to and you know what their strengths are and you know what their approach is. And to me, that just makes sense that it would give you so much helpful information, right? And how you work together. So
and why they're reacting, why someone reacts one way and somebody else, because adaptation is another aspect, and how people react. We react differently. We have approach to something, but we also react to things in a soul language way as well.
Okay. So if somebody wants to work with you, basically, and so just give us the next sip then, because what you said is I'm not just going to give you, the report, like taking that quiz, right? I'm not just going to give you the report. So you do, I'm assuming, is it like I don't want to assume.
I don't usually, I am, especially with my soul language, I'm my skill set is in consulting and training.
Yeah.
And then I end up coaching within that. So
Okay.
I don't often call myself a coach, but of course I'm coaching people. But I'm a consultant to your own soul language, because guess what? You have all your own answers. I'm only like helping you connect a few dots here and giving you some direction on where to go next. So
Yes.
you see, that's a little different than coaching, right? Coaching
Yes.
is different. So but
Well,
people
that's very kingy of you,
very
Lisa.
kingy of me, but
Very
people
kingy
call
of
that
you.
coaching because the coaching energy is really brilliant from your priest energy, who are like compassionate. I hear you, I see you, I understand you, right?
Yes.
And I can advise you. That's a coaching thing. That's priest energy. But the reason I say that for people is because first of all, to work with me, we have a conversation, because sales is a conversation, not a presentation. So I'm not going to present a specific offering to someone until I understand where they are and what they're looking for. And then I place them where it makes sense. If you really are an entrepreneur, a consultant, and you are selling, you might fit my group training that I do in the sales training piece, which always includes the soul language with it.
Yeah, gotcha.
If it's something else that you're up to, it may be more of a soul language thing, and you want to work with me over the long term, or even I have shorter term things to really dive in and start to explore who you are and how that's showing up, and maybe why you're getting the reactions you're getting from people, or why you're not getting the reactions you're looking for people, and things like that. That's work I do as well. So the easiest way is for people to reach out to me either on LinkedIn, or they can email me directly at lisa@lisadad.com.
And spell it's
D-A-double-D. I think that the biggest piece is D-A-double-D is, and it's D-A-double-D. Some people want to put an O in there, but it's probably the easiest way to reach out to me. And I love working people that feel called to it the way you do.
Yeah.
Like, you got to feel a calling to it. If you just need some sales training and the whole soul sales piece, not that interesting to you, there's lots of sales trainers out there. But if you really, the people that really want to bring who they are to the forefront more and be more of that, that's the people that really see the value and the benefit from it.
Sure. Of course. That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And so, all the links are going to be below. People are going to be able to find you, whatever, but it's Lisa, DADD.com, right? That's your website.
And the website, lisadad.com. And also, you can reach out to me as well, even if you don't want to have a deep dive conversation about your own soul language. I'm doing quite regular
workshops.
Training workshops.
Yeah. When's your next workshop coming up?
Yeah, the next workshop's next week. I don't know when you're airing this, but next week on September 21st. I'm going to keep doing them fairly regularly. Maybe not every month, but on a fairly monthly basis. And what you mentioned, I think, is really important at the very beginning here, is that often the workshop shifts depending on who shows up. So
because you're serving who's in front of you.
I'm serving who's in front of me. And especially last time, just the way people came in and when they came in, the whole agenda I had for that session got thrown out the window. And then I just go into leading mode. And so you're right. You're going to get a different experience every time, but that is a good way if people are like, I'm not sure if I want to maybe work with Lisa. Well, show up for the workshops. There's not no cost. The cost is your time and your participation, because what you won't get when you show up at one of my events is a big, huge webinar of me behind slides.
No, it's very much communicative, give and take,
experiential.
Yeah, very experiential. It's fantastic. So you guys, you can find her on her website. You can find her on LinkedIn. You can write to her at her email address. Go to one of her workshops. And is there a way for people to quote unquote opt into your list if they just want to get on your email list so they can find out about when these workshops are happening?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, just go to the website and sign up for the document. They'll get the document that you have there.
Yeah, right here, this cute little one, and it breaks down little snippets of the different soul length.
Just gives you a little taste of what different.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Little teaser on the different
get your little appetizer. So Lisa, thank you so much for coming on and sharing what you're passionate about, how you feel called to show up in the world, what your soul language is. And it's through you doing this work that so many other people get to know themselves more deeply and powerfully. And this is how we change the world, is if everybody's just kind of showing up in that space of love and who and how they're designed to be, like, everything just gets better.
I love that. We come right back to what we started at the beginning with that Marianne Williamson quote. And our deepest fear. And I don't know, maybe you want to post it in the show notes for everyone. So I don't have to,
it's a famous quote from her book, A Return to Love. I think it's on page 191 or 192. kind of, it's at
That's
the bottom and continues on.
yeah.
On. But you know, our deepest
Mhm.
fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are
You're
powerful
powerful
beyond
beyond
measure.
measure.
Yeah. So it's I have it all memorized. We're not going to be weird.
I do too. So we're not going to say it. We're not going to say it in case but I want, that's the piece that I really want to say, that this is what the soul language piece is to me, is that permission, the allowing, the reminding of to be in our own brilliance and fabulousness. Because I have a firm belief that when everybody has access to do and be that, and I know people don't, all because of their circumstances, but if we all had that ability, that it would shift so many things in this world in a positive way.
Yeah, and that's what A Course in Miracles calls a miracle. It's a shift in perception from fear to love. And when we can make that shift in perception, that's when miracles happen. So just thank you so much for doing your part and playing your role. I appreciate you so much. And you guys, thanks for hanging in here. This is a long episode, but you know me, I if I have a guest on, I just tell them book 2 hours because we don't know how long it's going to go. So just thank you for your time, for your energy, for sharing. I appreciate you so much. And you guys, you know, I end the show the same way all the time with variations. But look, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. I see you. I feel you. I celebrate you. I have so much gratitude for you being here and meeting my new friend, Lisa. I hope you got so much from the show. But wherever you go, may you leave the people, the place, the animals, the environment, and yourself better than how you found it. Wherever you go, may people be happier for you haven't been there. Wherever you go, may you be a blessing. Bye.
Hey, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of The Karen Kenney Show. I super duper appreciate your time, friendship, and support. And look, if something that I shared from my heart today somehow landed in yours, I'd love to hear about it. So please tag me on Facebook or Instagram or IG stories or wherever the cool kids are hanging out these days, and let me know what your favorite part was or what you found most helpful. You can find me over at Karen Kenney Live. That's Karen, KenneYlive. And if you're digging what I'm saying and you want to hear more, I'd be wicked grateful if you could go to iTunes and subscribe and leave a review, because you guys, that's how you'll help me to keep spreading the love. And if you can think of someone that could benefit from hearing this episode, please share it with them. I'd also love to stay connected with you. So if the feeling is mutual, please go to KarenKenney.com/freebie and download my free guide to building your spiritual team. Until next time, my brothers and sisters, keep living in the fearless flow. Know that I see you, I appreciate you, and I love you. And wherever you go, may you be a blessing.